Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows. Mac ran a hand along the cold, cracked surface of a nearby table. Each footstep echoed through the cavernous halls of the mansion, a symphony of emptiness. He was utterly alone. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the old house, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. A shiver snaked down his spine. The air felt heavy, burdened by unseen things. He wandered from room to room, each one a forgotten testament to a past he couldn't grasp. Faded grandeur clung to the peeling wallpaper and threadbare furniture. The mansion was a tomb of memories, both beautiful and terrible. He felt a growing unease, a prickling at the back of his neck. Something wasn't right. This place held a darkness that felt almost tangible. He stopped before a heavy oak desk, its surface buried under layers of dust and decay. A single envelope lay there, pristine and white against the grime. His name was scrawled on the front in a hand he recognized with a jolt, his own. But there was something off about the writing, a frantic energy that chilled him to the bone. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. The paper was thick and heavy, almost damp. He flipped it over. The date on the back stopped his breath in his throat. Tomorrow's date. He stared at the date, his mind rebelling against the impossible. A cold sweat prickled on his skin. The air seemed to thin, making it difficult to breathe. He knew he shouldn't open it. He knew it was wrong. But a morbid curiosity, a terrifying compulsion took hold. With shaking hands, he tore open the envelope. The words inside were his, yet not his. The handwriting was a mirror image of his own, familiar yet grotesquely distorted. The letters were cramped, frantic, as if written by a man possessed. The message was simple, stark in its terror. "Don't go into the room at the end of the hall. If you do, you'll take my place." A wave of dizziness washed over him. His reflection in the dusty window seemed to waver, another face briefly superimposed over his own. A face contorted in fear. He reread the note, each word a hammer blow to his sanity, his own handwriting twisted into a plea of desperation. But who was he pleading to, and what awaited him in that room? He could feel the mansion watching him, its cold, dead eyes boring into his soul. He was trapped. Time lost all meaning. In the suffocating silence of the mansion, the very concept of hours and minutes seemed to dissolve, slipping through his fingers like water. The air was thick with a sense of unreality, as if the world itself had forgotten how to move forward. Minutes stretched into hours, or were they seconds? The boundaries between past, present, and future blurred, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Every tick of the clock felt both urgent and meaningless, a reminder that he was trapped in a loop with no escape. The grandfather clock at the end of the hall chimed erratically, its hands spinning backward, then forward, then stopping altogether. The sound echoed through the empty corridors, a haunting melody that seemed to mock his confusion. He found himself replaying the same actions, the same moments, like a broken record skipping on a turntable. Each step he took felt both familiar and foreign, as if he were walking through someone else's memories. He would walk down the hallway, reach for the doorknob of the forbidden room, only to find himself back at the desk, the letter in his hand. No matter how many times he tried to break the cycle, he was always returned to the same starting point, as if the house itself was toying with him. Each time the handwriting on the letter seemed to grow more frantic, the ink bleeding into the paper as if alive. Words twisted and shifted before his eyes, messages changing with every reading, as if the letter was desperately trying to warn him of something he could never quite understand. He saw fleeting glimpses of himself out of the corner of his eye. Sometimes it was just a shadow, other times a full reflection that vanished the moment he turned to look. A flicker of movement in a mirror, a shadow that moved independently of him. The mirrors seemed to hold secrets, showing things that shouldn't be possible, hinting at realities just out of reach. Each reflection was different, yet undeniably him. Some looked back with pleading eyes, others with a cold detachment that sent chills down his spine. Older, younger, some with expressions of terror, others with a chilling emptiness in their eyes. It was as if every possible version of himself was trapped within the glass, each living out their own nightmare. He was surrounded by ghosts of himself, each trapped in their own personal hell. The mansion had become a labyrinth of time, and he was both prisoner and warden, forever searching for a way out that might not exist. The door at the end of the hall loomed in his mind, a physical manifestation of his growing dread. Every night as the house settled and the wind whispered through the cracks, his thoughts returned to that door, its presence haunting him even in his dreams. It was a heavy oak door, its surface scratched and scarred, as if it had fought off countless attempts to open it. The wood bore the marks of time and secrets, each groove a silent testament to what lay hidden beyond. No light escaped from beneath it and no sound from within. The silence was absolute, unnatural, as if the room itself had been cut off from the world outside. It was a void, a black hole of silence that seemed to draw him in. The darkness behind the door felt alive, pulsing with secrets and memories he could almost remember, but not quite. He could feel its pull, a magnetic force that tugged at his sanity. Each step closer made his heart race, his breath catch, as if the air itself thickened with every inch. He knew he shouldn't go near it. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to run, to forget the door even existed. The letter, his letter, screamed at him to stay away. The words, hastily scrawled in his own handwriting, were a desperate warning from a version of himself he barely recognized. But the closer he got, the more impossible it became to resist. Curiosity gnawed at him, a hunger for answers that overpowered his fear. Whispers seemed to emanate from the other side, whispers that sounded suspiciously like his own voice. They twisted through the air, echoing his doubts, his regrets, his deepest fears. They spoke of things he couldn't understand, of choices he hadn't made, of consequences he couldn't bear to face. Each word was a puzzle piece, a fragment of a story he was terrified to complete. He pressed his ear to the cold wood, his heart pounding in his chest. The chill seeped into his skin, but he couldn't pull away, not now. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They became a chorus, a symphony of voices that seemed to know him better than he knew himself. They were calling to him, beckoning him closer. With every heartbeat, the urge to open the door grew stronger, until it felt like the only thing in the world that mattered. More letters appeared. He found them scattered throughout the mansion, each one bearing his own handwriting, each one warning him of the room. But the messages were no longer consistent. Some urged him to stay away, to break free from the loop. Others begged him to enter the room, claiming it was the only way out. His mind reeled, struggling to make sense of the conflicting messages. Who was he supposed to trust? Which version of himself held the truth? He became obsessed with the letters, analyzing every stroke of the pen, every tremble of the hand. He searched for clues, for patterns, for any indication of what was real and what was not. But the more he searched, the more lost he became. He was adrift in a sea of his own making, drowning in the echoes of his own fear. He had entered the room before. He knew it with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. The memory was fragmented, incomplete, but it was there, lurking at the edge of his consciousness. He could almost recall the feeling of the cold doorknob beneath his hand, the way the hinges groaned as he pushed the door open. He could almost remember what he had seen inside, but the memory was always just out of reach, obscured by a fog of fear and confusion. He was trapped in a loop, condemned to repeat the same horrifying cycle for all eternity. He was both prisoner and jailer, victim and architect of his own torment. The realization was a physical blow, stealing his breath and leaving him trembling. He was lost, adrift in a sea of time with no hope of rescue. He couldn't fight it anymore. The weight pressing down on him was unbearable, a silent force that seemed to seep from the very walls of the ancient mansion. Every step he took echoed with the memories of those who had come before, and yet he felt utterly alone. The pull of the room was just too strong, the allure of the unknown too great. It was as if something beyond his understanding was calling to him, whispering secrets through the cracks in the floorboards. He had to know what lay beyond that door, no matter the cost. He had to see what awaited him on the other side, even if it meant facing his deepest fears. The air grew colder as he approached, and his heart pounded in his chest, anticipation and dread mingling in equal measure. With a final shuddering breath, he pushed open the door. The hinges groaned in protest as if warning him to turn back, but he pressed on, driven by a need he couldn't explain. The room was empty save for a single ornate mirror that stood against the far wall. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, and the silence was so complete it rang in his ears. Its surface was clouded with age, but as he approached, it shimmered, coming into sharp focus. The glass seemed to ripple, as if alive, drawing him closer with every heartbeat. He saw his reflection staring back at him, but it wasn't him. The figure in the mirror moved just a fraction out of sync, its eyes darker, its expression twisted with secrets. It was another version of himself, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with a terrible knowledge. This doppelganger seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 regrets, and its gaze pierced straight through him. The reflection reached out, a letter clutched in its hand. The paper looked impossibly old, the ink faded but still legible, as if it had been waiting for this moment for years. Mac took it, his fingers brushing against cold glass. The chill sent a shiver up his spine, and for a moment he wondered if he was still awake or lost in some fevered dream. The handwriting was his, but the name on the envelope wasn't. The letters curled in a way he recognized, but the identity they spelled out was a mystery. It was a name he didn't recognize, a name that meant nothing to him, yet somehow it felt important, as if it held the key to everything he had ever questioned. He looked up, but the reflection was gone. The mirror showed only his own bewildered face, alone in the gloom. He was alone once more, trapped in a nightmare of his own making. The silence pressed in and the letter trembled in his hand, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows. A man stood in the center of a vast, aging mansion, a sense of unease settling over him. He didn't know how he got there, but something felt wrong, off. He walked towards a heavy oak desk, drawn by an unseen force. An envelope lay there, pristine and white against the grime. His name was scrawled on the front in a hand he recognized with a jolt, his own. But there was something off about the writing, a frantic energy that chilled him to the bone. He picked it up, his fingers trembling as he read the date. Tomorrow's date. He knew with a certainty that defied all logic that he shouldn't open it. But the cycle had already begun.